This morning we explored the infrastructures of making, so crops, dyes, and local economies. And now we're going to turn to artists who are using the same materials, textiles, to question the systems that they come from. So the legacies of industrialization and colonization, the hierarchies of labor and value, and the ways in which textiles speak about various identities and race and class and belonging. So like with the previous session, I'm going to introduce each speaker before they present their work a little bit, and then we'll come together for what I think will be a briefish discussion like last time, and then we'll pick up some threads on that later. So we're going to start with Rezia Wahid, a Bangladeshi-born British textile artist and designer. She places her work in dual spheres, that of Bangladeshi tradition and Western modernism, and I'll let her take over from here and tell you more about her work.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. It's so beautiful out there. You probably want to be outside in the nature. Yes, so I am a weaver and artist, and as Debica has said, I'm a multidisciplinary artist. However, I began my practice with looking at the world of textiles in the larger context, where there were very few women making the global textiles history, and if they were quite in the background. As a Western artist, I felt that 25 years ago, going back 25 years ago, the craft of weaving was not in the vocabulary, although here we have a historically great making, and we have produced, I say we, because my identity is not just one or the other. I am not a British maker, I'm also a Bangladeshi maker. I was born there, and I have combined both identities within my creative practice. So you're looking at an image where these were a commissioned piece by a project I was commissioned by called Shape of Things. And it was very much looking at British makers who have a background which is not English or Scottish or Irish, but coming from somewhere that is indigenous culture of the Southeast and world. So it was a very unique project at that time, because back then we didn't have that global connection. There was something missing. Now there is a bit more connection. So that's how I feel. I looked at my need and my practice of creating light within my woven fabrics, and I found that cotton was a very rare material to source, the cotton that I was looking for. And through the research, I realized and I found that Bangladesh, historically, very, very going back in the 16th century, were producing the finest fabric, cotton fabric, muslin, jamdani, which was like gold, and historians, the colonial researchers found this to be a money-making production. And I won't go so deep into that, because I feel that as a practitioner, the work that I do is what you all have come here to listen to. So this is my countermuch loom. It's a floor loom. And when I moved to London, there was as I say, very, very few weavers at the studios and craft fairs. And I decided that I would show weaving to the craft, the historical craft, to the London audience. My work also has, as I said, I explore identity, I explore the material, natural materials, and they are predominantly linen, natural linen, cotton, silk, and wool. And I write feelings down, poems. So it's a lot of text inspired by history, my own history, my own identity, and the feelings that I have from nature. Nature plays a huge part. And it was through dandelion seeds that I wanted to create fine fabrics and found out about the Bangladeshi cloth. This is the British Museum, and storytelling is a huge part of my practice. And I'm not telling personal stories, I'm telling stories about textiles and the power of textiles. We are all here for the thread and textiles, and somehow, regardless of the colonial history, we are connected. And I think it's a beautiful connection that textiles were handled by the whole world separately, independently. We can't really say that, weaving was, this is where it came from, this, regardless of ownership. It's a human language, and that's what I try to communicate through the storytelling. This was a commission by the British Museum, where they were looking and had an exhibition of Islamic textiles. And I did a performance with how when the Muslims go to Mecca and do the pilgrimage there. And this is, I did a collaboration with a Muslim calligraphy artist. So his texts are printed and projected onto my pieces. And this is, so as I've just explained how I tell stories and I look at how textiles can be more than pieces of fabric. And one of my inspiration is how Gandhi, through cotton and textiles, empowered the Indian people, and we all know the history, how he then helped revive the cotton back into India. So this is connected. This project is connected to that story, and I call it the red thread, which is connected with the Greek mythology of how I very much feel that I came into weaving through a connection that is my heritage. And the red thread of my fate connected me to weaving and going back into looking at weaving as a maker, finding my own heritage. This is a piece of 9-meter fabric, which I wove after being inspired and collecting my experiences of motherhood and having felt my children within me and then outside me, where I manipulated a lot of the technique on the loom physically to create the sort of pattern that you see, where there's the lavender color and then going into the green fields. So there is the detail. So I felt really invisible personally when I was on maternity leaves, when I had my children. And so I wanted that part of my life as a maker, as a textile artist, to be visible within my work. So I decided to work freelance on my pieces, and it was COVID. You know, that's another thing, the theme that came up through all of our talks previously is COVID, when really I felt absolutely invisible. And so COVID allowed the time and the space for me to personally look at my practice as a mother artist. And here, those are the pieces that I wove. And when I say I manipulate, so my technique is I have done research on the Jamdani technique. So I use the supplementary technique, which we call it the supplementary yarn, adding the weave into the warp as a supplementary piece of yarn with our hands, with my hand. The Jamdani technique is when it's very, very, very hands-on, and they have needles, lots of needles and lots of weavers working together from under the loom. They have pit looms, so I'm doing it without that sort of, it's a kind of, I say, intense human weaving method. So I am now looking at this method, the Jamdani technique and muslin cloth of Bangladesh, in my PhD research, and hopefully combining both my practice and the indigenous technique of Bangladesh together.
Thanks so much. It would be good. Yeah, it would be great to hear more about your PhD as well if it comes up in the conversation beyond this. Thank you so much. So now we turn to Cheong Min, a Malaysian textile and fiber artist whose practice explores the colonial history of plantations in Malaysia and the social dimensions of material production.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm Simin. You can call me Min. So thank you, the British Textile Biennial, inviting me to come to the Blackburn and meet all the talented people here. I'm very happy to meet all of you. I'm Simin, and I'm an artist from Malaysia. And most of my artwork is based in textiles and fiber. So most of my artwork, I use fiber, the raw materials, and also the ready-made rope or some yarn into my artwork. So back to the back of the story of my artwork. Usually my artwork is rely on the colonial history, which I research for. Luckily, I have the residency in 2023. I went to London to do the research about the plantation in the British Malaya period. So this is the image which I found from the Kew Garden. It's not the image, actually it's a collection of the pineapple fiber. And this made me going more deeper to do the research about the fiber. And yeah, most of my artwork is related to and focus on the colonial history of the plantation in Malaya, especially is the system that supported the production and the export crop to the British Empire. So one of my topic is pineapple fiber, and then most of my artwork is reference from the archival image, which I found from the institutional organization. So you can see from the image, this is the object which I finding from the institutional organization in London. So why I keep going through the material of the pineapple leaf fiber, because actually I growing up near at the plantation of pineapple, and my grandma and my mom used to be the pineapple farmer before. So I heard a lot of daily story from my mom about how they working in the plantation and then what's their daily life. So make me more interesting into the plantation. Because when I'm growing up, we are not living in the plantation anymore. But yeah, and it's a very interesting story is my moms, they love to eat the fruit, but I'm the one don't like the fruit. But I use all the materials in my artwork. Yeah. So historically, the pineapple actually is not the native plant in Malaysia. It was introduced from the British colonizer from Brazil, and then coming and widely planted in Malaysia. So, and then after that, it became the major export crop in Malaysia to maybe to the Europe and US. In the last research, I found letters is talking about the British colonizer wants to develop the industry of the fiber, of this fiber, but they haven't started yet, and then they already come back to UK. So for me, this fiber represents both possibility and the absence, the lost future that's never materialized. Yeah. So in the weaving, all of my artwork is hand weaving. So it's a very long and slow, laborious process, and it's connected to the invisible labor that's supported in this plantation industry. So this is the reason why I keep continuing using the hand weaving as my process. So in this artwork, actually is the archival image of the buffalo carted the lotus with pineapple on the journey to the Singapore dot. Actually, Singapore used to be in the British Malaya before it's become independence. So the Singapore is a part of all the commercial crops coming to UK, before coming to UK. So this is one of the image. And then when I found this image, I feel very interesting. And then I weaving and leave the gaps in my textile. You can see there's a big gap, and then just left the exposure of the warp from the textile. So as a Chinese, in our cultures, the textile is not completed and it's not a very good ornament if you're not using the fully completed textiles. So, but for me, I will use it in the opposite way. I want to show the erasure and the untold history from my artwork. So this is the project which I did is talking about the abandoned pineapple canneries in my hometown, because maybe become more costly if want to export the pineapple fruit, or they found the more cheaper place to export the fruit cannery. So my hometown, the factory of the pineapple cans is already abandoned and disappeared. So this is the archival image which I found, that how the Chinese labor, they taking the already peeled pineapple and then put into the can by hand at the 19th century. So I use this image as my reference to my artwork. And I use the materials which I can find in the tropical country, like silk, cotton, and weaving with the pineapple yarn together. And also the natural dyes, which I can find in the Southeast Asia. So this is another artwork. It's talking about the imagine of the journey of the Chinese migrant laborers, like my ancestor. Especially this is more focused in the pineapple farmers who across the ocean to settle down in Malaysia. So I'm more focused what they carry on beyond the physical belonging. They only carry the culture and the emotional luggage of hope, endurance, and the determination to build a new life far from their homeland. So they carry all the religious and also their daily routines and their tradition to shifted through the migration. So when this belief encountered to the local cultures, it transferred to the hybrid practices rooted in the new land. So through this piece, I want to honor the resilience, spirit, and how the cultures, memories sustain through the ritual, altars, and the daily act of beliefs. So, and this also another artwork which I reference to the archival image, which I found when they're drying the yarn. Yeah. So actually, most of my artworks are using the supplementary weft technique as the medium, which is inspired from the Malaysia traditional weaving technique we call Junkere. Actually, is you adding the additional weft through the every rows of the weft. So you can adding like different colors in the same rows of the weft. So we call it supplementary weft, and they're all hand picked. Yeah, and yeah, this is the process. And also I use the hand scribe fiber from the leaves. You can see this. Yeah, this is the leaf, and then I will left the leaf upside, and then the fibers coming from the leaf. Okay. So the last word, sorry. So for me, the pineapples becomes more than just a crop. It becomes symbols of the spiritual endurance and my root and the belonging, home belonging for me and the identity. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so wonderful to see so many wonderful pieces of work on these slideshows all day. Next, we're going to turn to Lucille Junkere. Is that how did I pronounce it?
Junkere.
Junkere, okay. A research-based visual artist specializing in botanical and ochre pigments, sustainable textiles, and embroidery. Her research focuses on the impact of colonization on African Caribbean textile history. Do you have the clicker there? Yeah, you do.
Thank you. So hopefully this is timed nicely for 5 minutes. Taking us to Jamaica, and thoughts going out to Jamaica right now, and Cuba post-hurricane. I'm looking for plants that give a pigment dye, and natural fibres added by Jamaican artisans. It's a large endeavour. I've asked myself a few questions. To what extent can indigo and other natural dyes and fibres speak of identity and a past connected to chattel slavery? Chattel slavery is unique in that it destroyed the original identity of those who were enslaved. So consequently, people like myself of Jamaican ancestry and a lot of people in the Caribbean, the US, we do not know our African identity. And this work is about finding these plants. Yes, they give a colour or a pigment or a fibre, but it's also about the cultural identity. That music that was played in the car, interestingly, that's funeral music. And I think that is the strongest retention, African retention in Jamaica. It's a celebration of people's lives. And through this research, there's a lot of plants that are grave markers. They use the grave markers. They're also pigment, fibre plants. So I often go to masks used in West and Central African traditions. 90% of Jamaicans are of African descent, different places they were taken from, and so I take inspiration from those masks in seeking identity. So it's indigo, logwood, fustic. These are plants grown on plantations to export to European textile mills. We don't have a relationship with these plants in Jamaica, so it's about restoring a relationship, but what relationship do we have when that was denied? We have to create new memories, I guess. So I use a lot of waste. I found these old fan guards in Jamaica. This whole project, I respond to it with what I call these ancestral libations. Part 2, Welsh War, Slavery and Identity. I applied for this commission, got it. It's some of the research. You can find this document online, Cardiff University. Download it. What was missing was the voice of the enslaved. I came up to the British Textile Biennial 2023 to come and visit this cloth. Very elegant, respectful exhibition. I visited this space many times. Just sitting with that piece of remnant. So these are created from natural dyes, textile remnants from the National Wool Museum. I have a preference for strong, bold colours. So these are natural dyes, but I like to get the vivid colours from my natural dye process. The yellow is fustic, grown in plantations in Jamaica. It's identity. I love this portrait. It just says Welsh girls. And they're in what is become the traditional Welsh outfit. It's not black girls, it's Welsh girls. I was in residence at Cornell University, and one of the professors said, you need to talk about the work that you intended to do. The work that I intended to was inspired by Carrie Mae Weems. This is Renty. He was a former enslaved person. I wanted to create this garment, which is an agbada, which I felt that in some way restored his identity. I was given some of the cotton, Benin cotton from Textile Biennial, and because of all of the kind of conflicts in organisations not knowing how to work collaboratively, it kind of impacted the project, and I still lament that, and I plan to make that agbada. Is indigo, making colour now, indigo. I grow indigo in Jamaica. The seeds are from former plantation sites. Indigo is kind of like my signature colour. This is some ochre. Ochre is from the sites of slavery as well. Whenever there's a hurricane, it's an opportunity for me to collect soil from, the soil erosion. I'm bringing this project together in 2026, all of the libations. You can see there's quite a few of them. Part 8, but I'll show all of them. And this is a pigment and fibre archive for Jamaica. I do believe from doing this research that we can actually find our identity. And when I say we, this is a method and a structure that can speak to the whole of the Caribbean. and also African Americans as well, where we look at this material culture and find ourselves in it, but also addressing some of the challenges that the past, places used to export and extract. How do we create a respectful relationship? The same system that introduced scientific racism, that defined chattel slavery, destroyed our relationship with plants, placed us in a hierarchical position. And how do we restore that relationship with the very plants that we are dependent on for our survival? So for me, this project speaks to all of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we have Marcos Kueh. Do you have...
Hello. Yeah.
A textile artist from Sarawak, based in the Netherlands, whose work reimagined ancestral weaving traditions to explore themes of identity, labor, and heritage.
Hi, my name is Marcos, and I'm from Malaysia, but currently I'm based in the Netherlands. I guess I'm a textile artist, and this is my work. A bit about myself. My background is actually in graphic design and advertising, and then later on I switched to textiles. Many years ago, Simin probably heard this story like many times, but many years ago, when I was studying graphic design, my lecturer asked me, what type of graphic designer do you want to be? I told her, I want to be a graphic designer that works in New York. And my lecturer was like, I don't think you can do that. I'm like, why? She's like, you're Malaysian. Like, why do you think that you can be a better New York designer than a New York designer? And that threw me into a really big identity crisis, and motivated me to actually dive into this whole idea of what does it mean to be a Malaysian designer. That was many years ago, and since then I've been researching a lot about this idea or this topic of identity. It started from researching on a lot of local visual cultures. As a person coming from Borneo, you don't have a lot of reference of who you are. A lot of the reference that you come to know of yourself is from photographs of colonial times, of when the colonizer came and they tried to study us, and that's what was left for us to kind of pick up. So when I came to study in Europe as well, the questions still kind of persist, like who am I? When I tell people I'm from Borneo, the first thing that they tell me is, oh, does that mean that you live on tree houses? Do you have orangutans? And it's always very humorous for me, of course, that I know so much about Europe and the Western world, but there's still so much misunderstanding about who we are. And I start to question, where did they come from? How did they go? A lot of my research starts from visual culture, of course. One of my favorite pieces of visual material is the Malaysia Truly Asia tourism ad of having a rice planter and two white person seeing us planting paddy as like an entertainment. But also, when you kind of think about it, the advertisement was made by Malaysians, and we like to do this to ourselves. And where the kind of like started out a lot of like all these questions as well. Where does the textile come in? Well, I mean, I've been doing this work for many years, and I've always wanted to, I've always imagined my work in textiles. I have this romantic idea that before the arrival of paper and pen, before we wrote down English as a language, the ancestors of Borneo wove a lot of their dreams, their myths, the narratives into textiles. And that's where I thought like textiles could be a very important way of also continuing on this search for who we are as a human, as a race, as a nation, whatever you want to put it. Yeah, so I always start my research from like collecting visual images. So on the right side, you have posters of human zoos in Europe, where the colonizers built infrastructures that look like, for example, Filipino houses. Then they will move in actual Filipino humans into these enclosures. And Then they will brand it as human zoos during the World Trade Fair back then. And then you can see like the pictures in the middle. But nowadays, of course, we have anthropological museums. That means that we remove the human, but we still keep their clothes. And you're like always wondering, like, oh, does it make it less problematic? Is it more ethical this way? And of course, when you have all these anthropological items in museums, I don't get to choose what narrative I have about my own culture. So a lot of times I travel to the British Museum and I see my piece of cloth and the British Museum tells me what my culture is. And I'm like, oh, okay, nice, I guess. Kenyala Circus was my graduation project, and it came from that spite of trying to communicate with the Western world about my identity as a Malaysian, specifically from Borneo. I have a small poem here that says, am I exotic because I'm exotic? Am I exotic because they want me to be exotic? This strong urge to get down on my knees, maybe it's because I'm just confused and like to please. They told me that my problems were very small, so I made them really, really big so that they can see them. If it's too problematic and so painful for the brain, can I make it very, very colorful so that, they can see my problems and not have a headache? And these textiles are like a product of that. The basic idea is that I am taking all the stereotypical ideas of what it means to be from the jungles, from an exotic land, create creatures out of them, weave them into giant posters, and then try to sell it to the West as like collectibles. Some of these woven posters, woven banners can be very, very big. And this is one of the projects that I did for my graduation. I didn't intend to be an artist. I thought this was going to be the last thing I'm going to ever do in my creative practice. Spent all my money on it, and then that was kind of it, because my practice actually was in textile development. My background is in industrial weaving. That means that the job description, for example, is that a client gives me a picture of a cat. Someone needs to adopt the cat picture into files that the machine can weave. So my job is to translate that file so that the machines can weave the cat. But of course, I studied technically on the machines as well. On the top left, you can see that I was researching a lot on bamboo weaving, for example, or beadwork, trying to understand the structural integrity of the craft objects, and then trying to translate it into pixels that the computer can kind of understand, and then it will weave. So at the left bottom, you can see the results, perhaps a bit in the pink and the yellow, that there are patterns that come out from that. So besides, of course, thinking about cultural narratives and discourses, I'm also trying to develop and push for different types of industrial developments in the industrial processes of textile creation. Here you can see a bit of the detail of how the pattern will work when you see it up close. So you have a large-scale textile, and then when you kind of zoom into the details, then you get all these patterns. So Kenyala Circus is a traveling circus. It's a bit like the human zoo. So I bring my circus all over the world to parade them around. So this is in Singapore, and then it moved to Paris, in the La Monnaie. And with every edition as well, and in different locations, of course, different connotations come out. A lot of the projects about Kenyala Circus is about the commodification of my culture as a Bornean. And being in the space in Paris, this is called La Monnaie, where they printed the coins. I thought there's something very interesting about that. And of course, Paris was also one of the cities that had human zoos back then. And how does that connect to my practice as well? So as I'm traveling with the work, as the ringmaster of the circus, I'm also learning as well from the work. At a certain point, you just become the manager of this project, and you're just running around trying to make this project happen, and the work is just having its own life. Another project I wanted to quickly share is this project for Manifesta last year, and it was made in commission for a church in Barcelona. with each edition of Kelang Circus, there is always like a small story to it. And this story was about my confessions of almost wanting to be a Christian when I was growing up. So in a lot of my projects, I try to exclude the white person in the narrative. When you want to talk about decolonization, like how do you go around with the story if the white person is not involved? Because if the white person is involved, we all know they're always going to be the villain. So if it's just about me as a person from Borneo, what do I have to say to the church? I almost want to be a Christian because I thought like being a Christian means that you can become more white, means that you can have more power. And I've always struggled with that question. In the textile as well, besides developing for coats, I also developed different techniques. And in this textile, I've developed a way to kind of like have this split in between the textiles. And it's talking about this feeling of not being able to feel complete being a person from Borneo, of how at one side you want to be Bornean, you want to be proud of being Bornean, but at the other side, being Bornean means that you will never be on a developed person, it will never be from a developed country. It will always be the fact that you will always have to feel shame, and that's the confession I have for the church. This one is a rendition for Kuala Lumpur. It went back home. Kelang Circus right now as well, it's traveling around the world. Wanted to put a small slide about the current show that I just opened last week in London, and that's a new conversation. It's my first time showing in UK. Always wanted to show in UK because projects has always been developed in the Netherlands, never in the UK. It's always very comfortable because the Netherlands colonized Indonesia and I was colonized by the UK, so when we do topics, we don't rub onto each other too hard. But this is the first time that it's been showing in UK, and it's in the Lancashire Gallery in London. I won't show any pictures, you can go see it yourself. Just two more quick projects. This is the Urn project, and it's confessions about my parents' death in the future. My parents are still alive, but it's inspired by this idea of death meditations, about thinking about death before you die. And these are all kind of like soft sculptures where people can enter. It's an urn of my mom. And inside the urn is a Chinese word for sorry. And it's about the expectations of my mom that I cannot complete as a human, like as an Asian child that I cannot express with my mom. So I'm waiting for my mom to die so that I can whisper my apologies into her urn. But what I like about projects like this is that I'm also trying to figure out as well how we can use textiles to tell stories. In Borneo, you were born wrapped in textiles. The first thing that you encounter as a newborn is blankets that you wrap with a baby, and before you pass away, in Borneo as well, or around the world, you have your last textiles before you get buried into the ground. I just thought that there are so many dimensions on how we talk about textiles, we experience textiles, or we can create the experience of textiles, that there is a big industry still, or like this platform that we can still explore on. I'm going to skip this, but I just wanted to also quickly mention like a small exhibition that's happening right now in Manchester that I also just put out last week. And it's talking about the labor practices and the labor of what it means to produce textiles. I've been working as a textile producer for 4 years in the industry, and there's still a lot of questions of what it means to be an industrial weaver. If you even look through the first introductions of our names, I'm called an artist, but then why am I not being called a weaver? Is it because I'm an industrial weaver that I'm not recognized as a weaver? And these are questions that I'm trying to explore in the new project research as well. Of course, also talking about stories of capitalism, stories of race, stories of class, from the working process, from the factory grounds, because we're so used to talking about textiles from the end product. But there are actually a lot of stories that come up from the process of textile making that perhaps it's very invisible. In this image, there is an industrial machine in the art space, and that's what I'm trying to slowly introduce into the art galleries. The story I always like to tell is that, there's this always saying that children from the city, they know how to eat eggs, but they have never seen a chicken. Humans of contemporary times, we have fast fashion, we have Zara, we have clothes that we wear, but we have never seen the industrial machine that produces it. And that in turn means that we have never seen the people who works the industrial machines that keep our lives going. So that's where this whole brand new research starts, and it starts in Manchester, which is also very close to Lancashire. And if you have time, please come and have a look. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So it struck me that this morning we spent a lot of time talking about preserving practice and materials and skills, and all of you have talked about preservation of memory. So kind of the theme of preservation is there again, but it's about history and memory. And, you know, obviously I'm generalizing massively between the two panels, but I thought, given the limited time that we have, I would like to use the next few moments to talk about this idea of memory and memorialization. And Lucille, something I saw on your website was this quote about one of your projects where you talked about about the lack of memorials to honor ancestors. And you said, how do we honor our enslaved ancestors when there are no graves with wilting flowers to refresh or to shed remembrance tears? And I'm really interested in statues and permanent memorials and how they kind of preserve a very specific version of history, a very kind of singular, unified version of history. And I wanted to talk a bit about how textiles, maybe what function they serve as creating a different way of preserving memory that's a bit more nuanced and flexible. And I wonder, since I quoted you and your website, we could talk about in what way do you see textiles as a vehicle for preserving memory and having those conversations with people about history?
Where to start with that? I guess our relationship with textiles, we have to just change our attitude. We talk about disposable fashion, but maybe we still keep our feet dipped in. You know, so a textile passed down through generations, you cherish that textile, you repair it. Maybe when you are there at the beginning of the textile, you're involved in the process of making, even if you don't make it yourself. So I think it's that whole attitude needs to change. I did a master's one of my masters, creative masters, was in textile design. It was supposed to be a sustainable textile design course, and I actually still consider myself an intuitive maker, and maybe that's an indictment of the education system, but I was chastised because I didn't attend a colour forecasting workshop or something, and I said, I'm a natural dyer. Nature will provide the colours, and I'm not going to demand from nature. I have an ethical origin guidelines for my practice, so nature tells me what's in fashion. I don't actually like the word fashion when it comes to textiles. I think I feel like we should change it, because that's part of the problem. It suggests that something is coming and going. What about a word that is much more sustainable, that has a lot of meaning attached to it? Fashion speaks of trends. So the idea that people decide what is the colour for the season, well, what is our cultural relationship with that colour? They can't tell us that orange is the new black. What is my cultural relationship with orange? And in the case of those who are the descendants of people who are enslaved, we are having to make memories, to create, memories, and to attach memories and meaning to colours. I taught decolonial colour theory. Sometimes I like to teach. I'm an educator, trained educator, and I like to teach on programs widening participation. I believe that if you want to go to university, you have every right to be there, regardless of age or background, circumstances. And so I taught decolonial colour theory, and can I tell you, it resonated with every single one of those students. There were South Asian students coming from China, for their heritage, and they connected to that. So it's about assigning meaning to colour. So I think we have to sort of turn our back on some of this stuff that's imposed on us and create our own memories. And through those memories, more meaningful textiles, they become our memorials. That's what I feel.
Could you tell us a bit more about decolonial colour theory, since you've touched on it, and I don't, maybe others in the room know more than me, but it would be great to just hear a bit about what that is. And
I was inspired. There's a lot of stuff that I was inspired by, and then the inspiration for my work, obviously, it's quite specific to certain regions. I'm looking at stuff that informs my work, but you can take that and find your own inspiration. So I cannot remember her name, but she's an architect, African American, and she had, I think it was in, was it Chicago? There were these houses zoned for demolition in an area that was already deprived, and she went there and she painted the houses in certain colours, and these colours were given names that connected to African American culture, products used for the hair. Actually, one of them, I think it's a place that you send your remittances, and that made me smile, because we are sending remittances to places like Jamaica, etc. I sent over because I wanted people to prepare for the storm. So that would resonate with people, and you can take that and apply that to every culture. So she painted these houses, she's socially engaged, and all the people came and there was a discussion about the colours. And for me, who decides on a name for colour? I've got about 200 different plants now in my database for pigment that can give a pigment in Jamaica, about 100 for fibre, and I have not named the colours apart from one, Ancestor Brown and Ochre, because I believe that those names need to come from post-completion of this part, the community. So the community names. So what name do you give a colour? And so these students, in response to that lecture, they were giving these colours their own names, taking the names. So pillar box red. Well, pillar box red relates to the UK, doesn't it? Pillar box red, that's the colour of telephone boxes, the old telephone boxes before people, mobile phones. So pillar box red still stands. Venetian red. A lot of these colours are European names. What is our name for these colours? And we can assign our personal meaning, and the students were doing that. There's a lot more to the colour theory lecture, but I really loved the idea. I started writing about it, really ran with it, and I've actually started creating a kind of lesson on it, because I just think it's a way to kind of decolonise our mindset around colour. Mm-hmm. And to understand that every single community has their own relationship, and we need to be respectful of that relationship. Black does not mean dreary, and black in terms of my cultural connection means empowerment. Mm-hmm. When we were growing up and we were told that black wasn't beautiful, we looked to the past and we looked at all of the rhetoric around black is beautiful and black is empowerment. So, red in Akan culture that connects to some of the identities in Jamaica, red is a funeral colour. And funeral colour is celebratory. It's sending off the ancestors. Red means a lot of things in Chinese culture. Some of the students were talking about how red resonates for them for Chinese New Year. Every single student was then picking apart the colour and, assigning new meaning. So I think it's a good model.
Wonderful. Thank you for that sliver of an insight into that. I feel like there's lots more reading now I'm going to have to do. Thank you so much. Simin, I wanted to come to you about your work. You've talked about the work itself and the materials. I want to know a bit about its relationship to people who come to see it. In what way, what kind of memories are you hoping to evoke, and what kind of reactions do you have from people when they see your work?
Yeah, actually, when the people's coming out and then they realize that the pineapple leaves can be harvested and then can spun to the yarn. Everyone is very surprised of that, because in Malaysia, it's not many people knows the fiber can make for the garments of the clothes. Yeah. So I start this project is because when I'm studying master, and then we have the project to do the research on the materials of the yarn. And so when I'm flipping the books, talking about the colonial history of Taiwan, because I was studying in Taiwan before, and then I found out the report talking about there was an alternative product using the pineapple yarn to do textiles, and then they export to Japan for their empire for the emperor. Yeah, because the king liked to wearing the cloth of the pineapple leaf fiber made by that, because in summer it's very cool when you're wearing this, and it's stiff, so it's always make you like more comfortable and more professional for the textile. So it once has a threat to the Japan. So coming back to myself, I'm like, oh, because I was live in the pineapple town in Malaysia, so why not maybe we have the similar history, the colonial history like the Taiwans have. So I start this question to do my research. So luckily I have the residency in London in 2023. So I have a chance to do this research in the UK institution. So I went to the queue to find if they have any collection of the pineapple leaf, which is made by Malaysia. Because in Southeast Asia, Philippines have their traditional garments and use the pineapple leaf fiber. So I'm thinking back that we once have the major export of the pineapple to the UK. So maybe we have the similar history. So I go into the queue, and then I'm very lucky to find there's a box of the pineapple leaf fiber, which was exhibited in the Empire exhibition. I forget the years. It's 1960 or 50 in the Empire exhibition in UK. So it means that they want to develop this fiber, become the new maybe alternative product in the World War. I don't know, because also I found a letter is talking about they're trying to produce and industrialize the fiber, but they don't start yet. They just have like a report that doing the experiment, and then they found it's not very completed, it's not very successful. They want to doing more research about that, but it stopped there, only a letter of that. So I'm starting to find the archival image, which is connected with Malaya from the plantation of the pineapple. So I use this material to connect it with the archival image. So I'm talking to the people that weaving actually is the act of communication between the past and present. So it's not only talking about I use this only. I want to let the people know that the story behind these materials.
And what do you hope people take away from that? Do you think that you want them to go with a very specific message in terms of this is the history, or is there kind of scope for interpretation? You know, what are people taking away from your work, do you find?
I hope that people, when they looking at my artwork, they can know that the hidden story and then the untold story which behind this plantation. Because usually these labors and the migration story is not recorded on the official narrative. It's always like getting through from the generation in the families. Like the family stories, we always are talking about, my ancestor used to be blah, 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 or anything. And then is going through with the oral in the families. It's not always like talking out from the official, the open public,
Do you feel like textiles are a particularly easy way for people to relate to? So it's such a universal...
I think it's a very easy and the quick way to let the people knowing that, because textile is quite common to see in our daily life, and then it's the easiest way to let the people accept this medium as like the telling story.
Thank you. I wanted to turn to you next and talk about intergenerational knowledge, which is something that you mentioned a lot about passing down of specific types of skills. And could you talk a bit about how you think of textiles as a carrier of those skills in kind of tangible memories and intangible skills as well?
Yeah, so personally, thank you. As a teacher, you see, you never use a mic and you just talk. Personally, it was, I realized how textiles, I absolutely, resonate when you talk about textiles as a global connection, and every human are born, when they're born, that we are wrapped in cloth and we go back in cloth. And how much, what can you get that is stronger than that? Textiles. I, of course, experienced, it made me realize how important passing on technique and intergenerational preserving of indigenous techniques was when I was at the Globe Theatre, and as I was demonstrating how to weave on a table loom, and instantly I was asked if I had learned this from my country. Mm-hmm. And that's when the whole questions about my identity as a British and the connection of making, how important it was for my audience that I learn it, and I learned it from my ancestors. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't the case. I think that was a very strong story that impacted me with the importance of passing technique. So I had a mission to show everybody what weaving was, because for me, my path, I feel, is to talk about weaving, and it became my sort of life to show people how to weave. And of course I couldn't take my countermarch loom everywhere. So I think the question of what have I actually learned, because as a sort of British student, I learned from master weavers, not my ancestors. That is when I started looking at how in Bangladesh the weavers were passing on, they were a family, and the weavers pass on the weaving to their children. Their children start weaving with them together on the pit looms, which we can question. It looked like child labor, but that's how they passed on the master techniques of the indigenous Bangladeshi cloth. So it's very, very important. Now we are looking, because I think when we look at the history of what happened to Lancashire, we realize that because it wasn't passed on, we lost it for a little bit, and now we have to revisit it. Mm-hmm. So for me, that it really does. Yeah. It's really important.
Could you tell us a bit about how you're going to explore some of these ideas in your research, in your PhD?
So when I started researching, which was when I was at university in 1995, about how I'm going to capture air and light within my work, because that's what I wanted to do. I was totally inspired by the dandelion seeds flying and how they fly in air, and I wanted to capture this air, and that is when I found out about this fabric called baftana, woven air in Bangladesh. I couldn't find cotton in Britain, the fine cotton I wanted to weave with, and that those muslin cloths had already, years and years ago, had captured. Before even I could feel that sense of inspiration, those fabrics have already been made. So I looked at the V&A, and it was there. I found that cotton in Egypt. So now I would like to go to Bangladesh because there is a resurgence of revival, and many people have in the last decade got interested. I won't take credit that it was because of my work, but at that time, more than 25 years ago, I decided that I'm going to create my own voice and bring this light and airy cloth with my own voice as a maker and artist. So I used Japanese and Chinese fine silk. So my pieces are nothing like those pieces. However, now I hope that my PhD will take me to Bangladesh, meet those weavers who have kindly, continued through these years and years of craft is thriving now, but it's just now. There was a time where craft was not in the world vocabulary. It is now coming back. But how they preserved this technique and this tradition of fine weaving in Bangladesh. So I've got a planned field trip, and I've connected with villages and museums and galleries, and I'm hoping to go next year or the year after.
Fantastic. Hopefully you can pick up some of that later in the next session as well. Marcos, I wanted to turn to you about to talk again about memory, but specifically about interpretation, because you're exhibiting your work in lots of different contexts. And so I assume that the way that people are perceiving them, and then whatever the kind of memories or ideas that gets sparked are different. So how conscious are you about the different audiences and how they see the same ideas that you're putting forward in different contexts?
I feel like the diversity of perception is what is interesting for me as an artist. I can only speak as an artist from my perception and my experience of what I can communicate with my limited vocabulary. And I think the work expands the moment you put it out into the world. And when the world interacts with it, it expands and expands and expands. And from that onwards, I'm just catching up to learn from my work. Mm-hmm. You throw the work out into the world does its own thing. You're following whoever wants this work around and whoever is speaking to you about this work. And I think that's the only way you can kind of like learn as well as an artist, to just be honest about my experience, and then from your experience you connect with other people's experience.
Yeah, do you think that the kind of different contexts and different relationships people have with craft and with industrialization is a kind of factor in how people read what you're trying to say?
Yeah, those are questions that I have been thinking for a long, long time, because my interest was in weaving. Like, there was just something that just happened that I had no control on. I just like to weave. But when I was looking back into my own culture in Sarawak as well, and the business environment of Sarawak as well, the only way that we could kind of like sell our textiles was through tourism, was through a lens of, selling it as souvenirs. And that brought up a lot of questions for me as a contemporary weaver as well. Like, how do we actually tackle this subject? It was not until I went to the Netherlands that I saw the textile lab and the textile museum, and how they approach textile business using industrial looms to create artworks, to create products, to create interiors, that I realized that, the world out there is really big. The only thing I can do as a weaver, as a contemporary weaver, is just to do my best job to see where it leads. And if it works out for me in the end, I just hope that the younger weavers can find some sort of inspiration to realize that, oh, there's an economic sustainability in this venture. And from that venture onwards, if they're very truly interested in weaving, you can always head back. You can always go back. Because that's also how I started as well. I started from weaving, got into industrial weaving. But if you start from industrial weaving and you want to know more, and if it connects to your soul, and you want to know more about your ancestors, you kind of slowly trace back. But it needs to, at least from my point of view, come from a place of relevance. If the economic relevance nowadays is to try to see if you could expand industrial weaving in Sarawak, for example, I think the hardest thing to do for us is probably just how do we moderate that in a way that makes sense. I am friends with the elders in Sarawak as well. For some weird reason, I also grew up really close to the craft center there. So we kind of got, I didn't know that I was going to become a weaver. But I did bring my samples over to the elders to ask them how they feel about it. And they have just been very surprisingly supportive. They were encouraging me to continue on. And that was what was emotional to me, that they were willing to see past the importance of their own myth of trying to hold on to like what is important to them, but to let go and realize that, oh, maybe the next generation, this is what needs to happen. But we're always trying to balance because, of course, there's a sentiment of like where it all began, and those are still something that I'm exploring on.
Yeah, I think we're going in we've come back in a loop a little bit because you talked about tourism and we started talking about that earlier as well. And I guess something that maybe we could pick up in the next session is this idea of like craft as something that people kind of almost fetishize in a way, and whether that's it's got positives in that we're showing there's a revival of interest in making, but then also we're treating it as this kind of thing stuck in the past, and how that kind of affects whether we continue to practice. I'm conscious that we're pretty over time now and everyone needs to eat lunch, so I'm going to say thank you so much to our panelists and we will come back later. Thank you so much.